One of the things I like about illustrating is that it lets us have a glimpse at something that might not exist or have ever existed, but thanks to a person's ability to at least construct something that resembles what that scenario may have looked like if it were in front of us, we can kind of get a glimpse at it. Over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I started to just kind of draw some, I guess, alternate history, alternate reality illustrations of just what would be my idea of like a happy ending. Um, and I don't know. I guess maybe in a way it was just to let off some steam. I think about my mortality all the time. We could count this as something of a picture zero. Just showing a marriage, I guess, at a courthouse. I had a dingbat some years back that was like, "Oh, you were too young to get married, and could you afford a wedding?" And it's almost like in her mind she cannot understand, or even like explored like the possibility that if someone gets married at a courthouse or with just acquiring a marriage license, it is generally speaking much more affordable, and also the fact that or the possibility that the woman would split it with me, the cost rather. Um, I'm not against ceremonies and the various types of pageantries related to this stuff. The issue, and I talked about this, and we can't go back, is that I'm at a stage where a majority of the relatives who I would have liked to have had at my wedding are either so sick to where they very likely could not go, or they're deceased. A majority of which are deceased. So for me, it's not really something where other people being in attendance would make all that much of a difference. Um, but again, if it's something that both of us like split the bill on, like the whole an actual ceremony, I'm more open to it. And I've said before that a lot of the toxic crap that gets spewed on this site about, oh, these women, you have to make sure that you have money, and basically like telling you to be interested in a bunch of gold digging skanks. There are couples where whether they're homeless or they are struggling financially, the most important thing to them is simply being with each other, and having the piece of paper that says that they are is more significant than, oh, look, we threw this three, four, five, six, seven, $8,000 wedding that a bunch of people came to for a day, and after that it was all of our money was gone. But oh, at least we got to celebrate for that one day. So it's really just one of those things where it shows you the value system for, I guess, me and the type of woman I'd be interested in is so divergent from what seems to be, I'm not going to call it a majority, but plurality. Like I told the story of how you had this woman, this bimbo out of, I think it was Texas, and she was saying that she didn't want to have kids because the Earth's population was getting too large, some goofy crap. Uh, and eventually she said, "Oh, if you throw me a big extravagant wedding, I'll give you 2 children." And I said, "That sounds like goddamn blackmail." Because first of all, I'm not going to do something like that knowing that she can walk away from it afterward. But also, uh, I just don't trust her to be amendable, and that's not something you should even have to do, like leverage that over the other thing. It's just they're not congruent with each other. It doesn't make any sense to piss out thousands of dollars, you know, for something that's one day, while the woman gets to basically sit there and go, well, see, I'm going to do this other thing possibly later on that I can always back out of. Just it was a mess. But yeah, this is what I'd imagine. Like if I got my way, I would just do a private ceremony at a courthouse. Somebody can attend, few people, nothing special, nothing. No, because again, the main point here is just being with the other person. That's that would be the ideal in terms of just, hey, these two people really love each other and they want to be together, and they're going to go to this courthouse and pay this. I think it's like $91 for the marriage license, and then they'll be able to, live out the rest of their days together from that foundation where they picked an economically feasible method of marriage versus the overpriced pageantry that a lot of other people get excited for. The first one here is, because I kind of arrange these in the order of a day. Just waking up in the morning with a significant other. And I should also say that I based this off the appearance of the last woman I was actually romantically interested in. Although I guess I was kinder to her than she is to herself, because she's one of these people where she would post photos of herself on her different social media, but every photo is always this really up close shot of her face and then the shoulder blades. And of course, the implication is that she's hiding her lower half because she's not as confident with it, or has some kind of, I don't want to say body dysphoria, which is really sad because irrespective of how things with her went, I would say I still find her very pretty. And I know from just seeing her face that she's, even if she had a belly, it's not, I would, she still would be attractive to me. So, I guess I'm just saying that here she's slimmed down compared to the real life version. Yeah, it's really just me showing something of what it would be like to actually, wake up next to someone. I've never had that experience in it, in the romantic sense, and just to kind of have, because I know that a lot of people say, oh, this person will die alone. It's like, well, if you're, the older we get, 30s, 40s, 50s, there is the possibility that, we might have some disease. It could be a heart attack. It could, just anything of that nature. And if someone is not there with us to, to kind of like notice if we've slipped it, into some unnatural state of unconsciousness, it might be too late. There's also the fact that a lot of times when couples are together, there's a general sense of feeling more safe, when you have someone else with you, than if you're just, living in some big house by yourself. Second one is family eating at the dinner table. I didn't put much thought into designing the kid. I mostly skip breakfast, have skipped breakfast for years at this point, and that's due to a lot of different themes. Sometimes I don't wake up until, or get up really until around noon, so I just go straight to lunch. Other times I've got some morning appointment, like like when I've worked different jobs, you get up in the morning, go over there, and you don't really, it's like the second I get up, I'm just getting in my car and just driving over there. So there's not time to sit down and eat. But, in this scenario, the whole family gets up around 7 a.m., right? School's at 8, work is at, 9, and they sit there and they eat together, just talk about how their sleep was, what they're going to do for the day, just general discussion. And that's something that I had, in my earlier years with the relatives I lived with. And then the third image is just kind of, again, that physical intimacy where, like, we're not, I don't depict any actual like explicit acts here, but a big part of, I guess, the whole frustration thing with relationships is that some of the more subtle stuff really is lost, in terms of just how, how romances tend to go in the modern era. Like like I did the whole video about why I think long distance relationships are dumb, and how, what's the point of having a girlfriend who you can't touch, and who, if she lives in a whole damn other country, is probably never going to be someone that you can touch. And one of the reasons I even bothered with this last woman I was interested in is that she lived a hell of a lot closer to me than 90 something percent of the other broads I've been attracted to. And for that reason, I had lowered my, I guess, desires to just wanting to go on a date, because that seemed a lot more attainable with someone that was closer, that was of driving distance, than someone that's in some state on the other side of the country or in another country altogether. And it really, for this image, it's kind of representing of that again, that basic physical intimacy that I just do not have. You know, hugging, holding hands, you know, just stuff that makes you feel as if this person wants to connect with you in a, again, it doesn't have to be some explicit, you know, manner of intimacy, but just touch this person. Hey, how are you? You know, just to kind of, it's like a familiarity that is really, it's special because it's something that only romantic partners tend to do with each other in certain ways. You know, like this person will grab you in a way that, you know, no one else would because you are theirs. And just to start off the day with that kind of gesture, you know, it sort of reminds you that, hey, you know, this is something that I can kind of think about when I'm working today, and, you know, possibly get more of after I come back. Who knows? But it's a nice way to start things off because you feel, or at least I believe I would feel, some type of closer connection with someone than, you know, just how things are now, where I really, you know, I brought up how there was like this actress at this convention I went to that, when I took a picture with her, she like put her arm around my back, and it was, I brought that up only because I said it's been so long since I've had anyone, you know, just grab me in that way. You know, most of the time, if it's a handshake, it you know, that's about it. It's you know, you really start to kind of feel like a ghost in a sense, where people just, like, you pick up on how few times you have any kind of physical connection with someone. There was a girl at my job who I was helping her to lift something, and my palms, like my hands, touched her hands, and, you know, I was just so like, really took in just how soft they were. And again, it goes back to that same thing of just when you don't have a partner who you can perform even the most basic acts of physical, you know, uh, connections with, because that partner lives in another country, or, you know, whatever other factors may lead to it. You're going to, at least for me anyway, feel this sense of just like an otherworldliness. Like, you exist, people can see you, but you really, there's not that much of a difference between you and a ghost. You know, like you're just kind of there. You're like a hovering thing that is visible to their naked eye, but it's not something they would really ever interact with. You know, there's no physicality to anything. The fourth one is just leaving from the house. Of course, we'll get more into this later on, but, you know, it's, I always figured, because I've seen it where, you know, couples will have one partner pick up the kid, or like one will take the kid to school and will pick the kid up from school. You know, because usually if both work, one starts earlier than the other so that one can have the time to, you know, go and take the kid to school. The other one can have time to, you know, just they move around, they shift it where they share the responsibilities. But yeah, this is just, you know, waving goodbye, see you later. Again, I've really slimmed her down. Like I said, I never got to see a picture of her below the shoulder blades. So maybe this is how she looks. I'd imagine that if she were confident with the bottom part of herself, she would have displayed it in her must be dozen or so images that she posts online. But, you know, whatever. I mean, it's not up to me to decide that. The other one here is me working. I'm not going to call it a dream job, but I said that, like, for me, the most important thing about a job is having the ability to take care of yourself. That is the most significant thing. I don't care what anybody says. If you cannot afford to take care of yourself from your job, what's even the point? That's just my position. And I stand by it. And in the past, I was someone who wanted to be a teacher, until, you know, going to college and basically getting price gouged out of it by, you know, an out-of-state school that wanted over 10 grand. And I said, it doesn't make any sense for me to sit here and pay out 20 or 30 grand in loans, and then you're living in some apartment building paycheck to paycheck with an anchor over your leg for the rest of your life, however short it may end up being. So I just said, you know, this is dumb. But for me, the delivery driver jobs, you know, the stuff where, like, you're going outside, you've got a set number of things you need delivered or taken out in, was it 8, 9, 10 hours? that always felt the most like something I would be into, because I'm someone who likes going outside. I like the sun. If it's raining, that's a different story, but I, bring an umbrella, whatever. And I like being able to see different types of people, different types of locations, have like a set thing that I need to do before the end of the day. Just it's structured. It's stable. Now, of course, I also like different customer service jobs, like for example 7-Eleven or these other retailers. But like I said, 7-Eleven is a place that is just for a black person, it's like applying into the void. That my unpopular colors shine through with those scumbags. I mean, I'm not kidding when I think I showed my unpopular color video where you apply for 30, 40 of those, and the only thing you can get, if it's not a rejection, a Dear John letter email, it's complete silence. So I just said, this is stupid, and stopped wasting my time even trying with them. Because it's just, if you keep doing something and noticing that it's not going anywhere, you're going to walk away from it. Now, this is probably my favorite of the images because it's emblematic of what I actually would have wanted. So there was a bimbo I met on Discord some years back, not years back, earlier this year. There are bimbos I met years ago, but that's another story. But there was a bimbo who I was kind of like talking about the whole, all these different women that don't want kids thing. And she said, oh, maybe you could meet one of those baby mama girls and knock up one of them. I said, I didn't like say this to her, but for me, this kind of stuff has to be done correctly. I don't like modern feminism because a lot of the chicks that push it are not consistent with their goals. Like, I don't understand how women want to be treated equally to men, but then at the same time, there's also women who think that they should be able to sit and clean at the house while the guy goes and works 40, 50, 60 hours a week. I don't understand how women can get paid the same amount of money as a man for a job, but then the same job will assign all of the physical labor task to the males, and then let the only use the girls for that type of work as like a last resort. Like, oh damn, we can't get anybody else. And this and for me, this image with I'm holding the money, she's holding her money. It's supposed to show that this is an equal partnership, that both partners have a desire, right, and a combined goal of, we work each week and we both contribute. We're cutting everything in half, and it's like suddenly that $2,000 for rent every month, when it's cut down to 1,000, that's only on a minimum, even on a minimum wage job. If it's full time, that's only 2 weeks of work to pay for where you live for a whole month. I mean, it's, that means you're getting at least half of your check to cover the other expenses. And, that's why I said when people, we talk about how, and we'll get more into this later, but a lot of the modern chicks, get on my nerves because like a lot of the gold diggers and the ones that don't want to have kids. It's like, again, there are women I have seen where they actually have a partner that they work with to, go and take care of themselves, and then they in turn help the man or take care of the man as well. With her, she was so frustrating because, like I said, she was in a situation that was not her fault, but and I compared it to what happened to me last year, paying all this stuff on this house that, just because somebody else took out a loan. But the difference between us was that there was a set, like that only been going for a year for me, and I had like a set goal of like getting rid of that. With her, her like, bad economic situation, it had worsened over the previous year, but her having to do things, or I guess take care of stuff that was not her fault or that she shouldn't have to be taken care of, She said it had been going for 10 years. And I was like, okay, well, hell, is there any way that, you can kind of like, what all do you need to, just kind of like to I tried to get some more information just for the sake of possibly mapping out of like, okay, what is the full sum total of things that need to be done for you to no longer have this anchor by your leg? And she just was very evasive. And it's, I tried to say that, like, I don't ask a question like that because everything I did was always in her favor. Hey, how you doing? Oh, are you all right? Just so there was, I didn't like understand that if there was a possibility of suspicion, what she stood to lose from just honestly stating what the full problem was. But again, that's where I just started to kind of back away from this because I said it looks like you're a sinking ship, and if I try to get more involved, I'm just gonna go down with you, and then there will it's not going to end pretty for either one of us. But yeah, here is just an example of the type of relationship I like, which is an equal partnership where both sides contribute and help out and work, and they're actually being partners. Like, again, all this stupid stuff with the woman sitting at home all day, that's it's archaic. Like, in the 60s, 70s, maybe the 80s, okay, fine. Well, I still wouldn't like it back then, but at least, it I'll just say it this way. In the current era, where the cost of living in the United States is going up everywhere, including in the oh so lovely South, because a lot of factories are moving down there, people are moving down there, and it's increasing the cost of housing. But in modern society, where the cost of living is increasing, there is no goddamn reason that a man should put up with living with a woman who is not working at all. To me, that doesn't make any sense. That's not something I'm interested in, and that's why every time that has been proposed by one of them, I have shot it down because it is stupid. And that was, part of my attraction to her, that I really felt that if she could just remove herself from the things that were, like, really stopping her from just being able to live well off, right? Because her job was way, and I brought this up before. She has a full-time job, so it wasn't even like a matter of, oh, my job doesn't pay me enough. It's literally I'm just the sole person having to take care of these other people. Just, it wasn't fair. It really was not. But again, she could not bring herself to, with me, map out, how is this going to end? How do we resolve this? And that's, again, played into me walking away. Of course, we didn't have a falling out. I've become a lot more passive in terms of, like, before I used to go, oh man, I'm so sick of you and I wasted my time with you. Now I just kind of go, okay, I've been talking to her for, let's see, this many months. It's taken her this long to reply to this, that, or the other. All right, I'm out here. And then, they might still try to speak to me. They might not. Who knows? Who cares? I spoke to her, or I had an interaction with her as recently as yesterday. So, there, I'm a lot. I'm at a point where it's kind of like everything has sort of crescendoed in such a way that you don't really get as worked up over it anymore, because you just kind of expect it to just always be like this, talking to a new one, and then she does something stupid, and then you walk away and you either have to start all over again or just say to hell with it for, more years. I mean, nothing changes. So we're not surprised anymore. Although I will say, with her, again, the only thing that made me kind of invest a little bit more time in it was that the circumstances were not there. They were atypical. They weren't what I usually get, where it's like someone who's close by, and it's just that was the only thing that made it different. Now this one's actually supposed to be, like a little family room. I do like that the portraits in the back of FDR and LBJ are they're supposed to be part of like that foreshadowing of the different presidents I would do documentaries on. Just, which ones I would do and actually complete. I don't want to say I would actually just put up their portraits in my house, but just, just as for like a visual thing, just to put those there. And I guess to go back to what was said earlier with regard to the whole, women that don't want to have kids thing. So when I was first starting to make, content about women, there were a lot of people who would make fun of me. Ha 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 ha! You can't get a girlfriend. Ha 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 ha! You can't get a date. Ha ha! You can't. All this stuff. And I said, at a certain point, as I got older, as I started to just kind of get, the different losses that were piling up, I said, being with one of them, right, is cool. Like, it's a nice idea on paper. It's something that sounds really good when you're just thinking about it. But if you can't get the things you want out of being with one of them, there's just no point. Like, if I met some woman who I thought was, I guess, hot, 9 out of 10 times, whatever the rating system people have, but she doesn't want to have kids, she wants to sit at the house and not do anything, I would say, yeah, this is kind of stupid. This is not anything I'd want. Attractive women are a dime a dozen after all. That's why almost anytime you see one of them, they have a boyfriend. But again, this goes, I started, like, I have had people such as, like, when I brought up the whole, women that don't want to have kids thing, there are people who accuse me of, like, just bringing it up in the middle of a conversation. That's actually not true. What tends to happen now is that I'll speak to some woman on, like, a different website or even in real life, and then she'll just mention it. Like, I don't have to invoke it. Because I said before that I have not asked a woman out in 4 years. Even with the one that I've been, like, drawing the different pictures of in this, we never got to the point where I asked her directly, hey, do you want to go on a date? What was supposed to happen is I was going to ask her for her phone number, and then, like, I sent it as a private message on a website that she uses every goddamn day. And for an entire month, I waited, and she didn't reply. And I said, all right, well, this looks like this is not going anywhere. That was the exchange. So it never even got to the point of, like, directly asking her for, that information. But I was really saddened when I see people like Jem, and there's other extremists too, but they go and they say, oh, most women want kids. I'm like, well, what proof do you have of this? It's like, if I can go out and talk to them and without even asking, right, and they just volunteer this information to me, I think that's a pretty good sign that this is a common thing amongst them. It's not something that is rare. See, women who don't want kids, I did the video pricing yourself out of the market, but basically what is going on now is that they're like the extension of how it used to be a thing of, like, oh man, getting a date should be way easier than talking to 100 or 200 or 300 or 400 women. Like, are you serious? They're like an adult version of that, where first it was getting a date is harder than it should be. Now meeting a woman who actually has the same long-term goals as you is harder than it should be. And whether, like, even if the number of women who don't want to have kids was, like, personally, I think it's in at least in the United States, it's like 70 or 80%. That's my opinion. I'm literally saying this is my opinion, because we have, like, the facts of the 30-year low in terms of birth rates. But even if it were something like 30, like if you cut that in half to 30 or 40%, that is a big number for just like that. That means that when you go up and talk to a woman and you start asking her questions and trying to get to know her and all the other little, nonsense you do to try and court one of them, you're basically, on average, what is it? She has a third of a chance of just being like, yeah, that thing that people have been doing for decades and centuries, right? Creating life and being able to take care of it and, produce productive members of society. I'm good. I'll pass. And this goes back to just how I thought about all the different stuff that's been written about me. You have the guys who would say, they don't come around as often anymore, but like, oh, you need to exercise, you need to make money. And it's like, all this stuff is cool on paper, but we talk about, like, these goals, right? If, like, the end goal, the ultimate goal of trying to be with a woman, at least for me anyway, is to get married and have a family. If I know that a sizable portion of chicks are not interested in doing that, then I'm going to have even less incentive to, want to bother with them. And as I've said before, I know people blame me for every damn thing. I had one of my relatives asking, "Oh, do you ask them if they want to have kids?" No, I do not. But of course, it's my fault. The reality is, it is not a personal failing of mine if a woman has decided that she doesn't want to have a family. That is something that's completely unrelated to me. There is nothing I can say to change that, and it's not something that's up to me to change. You are dealing with a generation of girls, and when I say girls, we're talking about 20s, 30s, even some that are like late teens, who 18, 19, who have basically taken the matriarchal role, right? The thing that used to be the reason why people would say, spare the women and children, the women need to reproduce. We need women to reproduce. They've taken again this classic role for themselves, and have like grown to despise and detest it, so that when a man is like, hey, I want to do this thing that people have been doing for for years. Oh no. And that in turn, me being one of the guys that wants to have a family, is like, okay, well, I guess never mind. Like this last chick, I didn't even ask her because I didn't. Odds are I wouldn't like the answer I would get. And again, the main goal with her really was just to get, a date because of her proximity to me. But I digress. Of course, the last picture is just laying down. Again, that physical intimacy. So I'm honest. I like to tell the truth as often as I can. I think that in most cases I do that. Sometimes I can be a little bit reluctant depending on what it is, what the subject matter is. But again, as someone who likes to tell the truth, as someone who likes to look at patterns and parallels and just recognize when something is not going in a way that I think is fruitful or to my benefit or to someone else's benefit, the only thing in this video that could possibly come to pass, only thing, is me getting a better job. I think that the employers, either because of their racial animus not being a factor or because they've just run through so many damn people, are inclined to give me more chances as time passes. But what I am so frustrated by, and I tried to explain this to people, is that I live in the state with the largest number of people. And again, I live in a state where I've talked before about, you go to some of these jobs, it's all Hispanics, all whites, all whatever, whatever group. I wish people would acknowledge those factors. I wish they would say, hey, it looks like, yeah, that's possible that this black person might not have gotten this job where the whole place is, owned, operated, and facilitated by whites because they don't want a black person working there. But that never comes up. But also I should say that the me of this of now is not I'm not the same as what I was in 2017, 18, 19, 20, where I would fill out job applications, say, oh, it's my first job, because you're not going to obviously put down stuff that you've been fired from. But fast forward years later and you're putting down an application with 3, 4, 5 jobs, and you have these people online and even in real life who are like, oh, well, maybe you didn't get hired because you don't have the experience, or maybe you didn't get hired because they want. It's like, guys, let's drop the charade. Again, that excuse worked years ago when I would apply for stuff with no jobs on my resume, but now there's multiple jobs there and they still play the same stupid games because this isn't about having experience or a resume. It is, oh, we don't want to hire this person either because we have so many other damn people applying, or they're a race we don't like. Let's call it what it is. I talked about how a lot of my depression comes from just the constant losses of the few people I ever cared about. And I guess I always try to explain that in a life where there is evolution and progression, while it would not necessarily erase those feelings of sadness, to have people enter your life, like a wife, someone you've dated for months, years, and have grown to legitimately love, and then children as well, who you could, be excited for the future of, in terms of, what they'll grow into and to be there for them. I think that if those things were there, along with, just having stable work to be able to take care of yourself and whoever else you might need to assist from time to time, I think those factors together would lead my more depressive moods to be not as recurring as they currently are. But yeah, I just think that in a rotten society, you have employers that are playing games, in terms of what, like, hiring people or not hiring them. Even after they hire you, they still do stupid stuff like give you one shift a week, because they're priced themselves out of the market. And you have a lot of women that are just anti-family. They are against having children. They some of them are against getting married. And they have the right. Like, I always say, I get frustrated by the fact, not necessarily that there are women who don't want to have kids, but that there's so damn many of them, because I truly don't believe that I will ever meet one of them who is willing to work as equal partners, desiring to have a family and be there. I think you're more likely to see hell freeze over. There is something inside of the modern female in this rotten society that is just rancid. And I'm not. I know people will blame me and they'll call me all types of names, but I'm just telling the truth. I have tried with them repeatedly, but there's some stuff that even Jesus couldn't fix with all of his magic abilities. I mean, you can't make somebody or a group of people who are against having children want to have children. And that is the biggest cause for what has been a true lack of interest in them on my part. I don't get excited at the prospect of being with one of them if I know that there's this wall that they've put up that is going to kill what I want to do. And man, it's frustrating because, I went to a store a day or two ago. Yeah, 7-Eleven. Saw a man with his little boy. Boy must have probably been about 3 or 4 years old. I went to this charging station. I don't own a Tesla, but I was with someone that has one. And there was a girl who she had her daughter with her, I think in like the back seat, a little booster seat, and had like a picture of her that she printed out and had kind of, I guess, their little, I guess, dashboard photo. I was like, oh, that's, really nice. And I was like, why can't I have that? And just to reiterate, that's not because of a personal failing. That is because this is a generation of women who are anti-family, anti-growth, really just against doing anything that requires like working together and trying to create a better life for themselves with someone else. And they have the right to be that way, but I just it truly saddens me, because I think if they were as different as people say they are, I would have been able to find one that wanted to do these things years ago. If all these jobs that put up now hiring signs were actually hiring, would have been able to find one that wanted to hire me like that, and not cut up my hours over stupid stuff. So, it's all just sad to me. It really is. But I like the drawings because at least, again, I get some visual indication of what a different life and a better one would have looked like. I have a lot of people who talk about, like, oh, there's something wrong with you if you admit you're depressed. But, I say this with sincerity. If, like, I feel a motivation to get up and do things because I have these different projects I really want to do, different stuff also outside of here as well. But if I were waiting on the magic woman who the prophesized female who's going to be so much different from all the other ones and sweep me off my feet and put a glass slipper on my, size 14 foot, I would have died long ago. Because it's like this has been going for years, and like they just keep getting what's the Jim Carrey movie, Dumb and Dumber? Like, you first it was it's hard to get a date. Now it's hard to even meet one that hasn't stuck her head in the ground against the idea of having a family. I mean, there's no hope for them, and there's no hope for me being with one of them. So yeah, I do think the job thing could change, but in terms of ever being able to, again, meet someone and have a family, my future is behind me.